to order. It's 10:01.
Councillor Colburn, if I could just interrupt for 1 minute, we just have to enable the live stream.
Yep.
So Brian, if you could turn that on.
Thank you.
Okay, Madam Chair, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Welcome back, everybody. I hope everyone had a good time off over the holidays. I'll call the meeting to order and just begin with our land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Anishinaabe, the people of the three fires known as the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi nations who have inhabited this land from time immemorial. And further, give thanks to the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash, now known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. We also recognize the Métis and Inuit whose ancestors share this land and these waters. May we all as treaty people live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all its diverse peoples. So I look to have the agenda approved. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda that anyone wishes to bring forward? Anne?
Yeah, I had two. And first, I would really like to say hello and welcome to Cynthia. But I also know that Cynthia comes from the Peterborough area. And if you go online, they've got a pretty good looking climate action plan. So I wonder if whether today or at some point, Cynthia could share with us the process leading to that plan, maybe some of the detail of the plan, as well as the functioning of the community committee that I saw was connected to the plan. I think that would be really, really good information for us to kind of lead us down the path that we're going down. So that would be a request, whether it's for today or for a subsequent meeting. The other agenda item that I would like to add is I have seen both at council and now in the newspaper regarding the trail planning that is happening in Georgian Bluffs, that the Climate Action Committee is going to be asked to be part of the trail planning. And I would like, I think it would be Steve, to kind of speak to what that role would look like.
Okay, perfect.
So
all
those
right,
are two additions.
Thank you. That sounds good. So I had planned on introducing Cynthia, and maybe she can give us a bit of a brief overview of her work in Peterborough with the climate action plan there. And if there's more detailed information that would be helpful to bring back at another time, perhaps. And maybe we can move the trail plan question to Steve's staff report under 8.1. Okay, are there any other changes or additions that anyone wishes to bring forward? Okay, so with those two additions, I would just ask that someone move to approve the agenda. Thank you, Anne, and all those in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Just a statement about declaring pecuniary interest. As you know, anytime during the course of the meeting or at this point in time, any conflicts of interest would be welcome to come forward at any point. And so moving on to the introduction of our CAO, I, with great pleasure, would like to introduce Cynthia Fletcher, who is our new CAO, who just has a few days under her belt, which she keeps reminding me of, and that's important because I, gung-ho to get things done quickly. We are super excited to have Cynthia with her wealth of knowledge and experience from the Peterborough area. And at that, I will turn the floor over to Cynthia to give us a little introduction to yourself.
Through you, Chair Colburn, to the committee, thanks so much. And I'm actually really happy to be part of this committee, at least for the near term, and we'll see what happens long term. I'll do a bit of an introduction, and I'll talk a little bit about Peterborough, but I also spent 9 years in Kitchener, and Waterloo Region has quite an extensive sustainability and climate action plan. What I'm going to share with you is some lived experience. And what I will tell you is while Peterborough has a great climate action plan, or a pretty extensive one, they're actually going to look at revamping it. And that's probably the lived experience that I'll share with you as we look for the township to create our own climate action plan. And the reason that they're looking at revamping it is, I think, and even when I look at the agenda for this committee, there are so many great ideas. There are so many things that people would like us to do. But what I would encourage us as we go through and look at creating the township's climate action plan is that we really focus on some areas and that they're realistic and achievable. The other thing, so if you're not familiar with Peterborough, there's a river and a canal that runs through it, extensive wetlands, lots of watersheds and subwatersheds. So what you'll hear me talk about is as much on the adaptation side of our climate action plan as the mitigation side. Peterborough also has drumlins, which are big hills. There's very little flat, dry land in Peterborough. So there's an extensive flood reduction master plan, watershed plan that also forms their climate action plan. On the mitigation side, I think that's where we need to be realistic and focused as to what our community can achieve. There's lots of great ideas out there, as I say. And the other thing that Peterborough is going to look at is very much an education and incentive approach. There are a couple of areas where they started down the path of a more punitive approach to things and found that wasn't successful. And just to finish off, I think we need to find a balance of some bigger picture, longer term things. We need to find areas that we can advocate with other levels of government because we cannot do everything at the township level. And then we need to find some areas where we can make some shorter term or in the now strides. And all of that to say we want to really engage our community, get them on board and bring them along. I think if we try to do too many things too quickly, we actually overwhelm our community. And so Councillor Coburn, Chair Coburn, when I look at all the great ideas on the agenda, it would be my thought or suggestion that we incorporate those as part of our consultants' review as we bring them on board, and have them help us with what are the best areas for the township to focus on, given our unique situation. And with that, I'll stop talking now. Thanks.
No, that's very helpful. No, that all sounds very reasonable. So I think your experience will and your passion for the environment and so on will be a good fit with this committee. Any quick questions, perhaps for Cynthia at this time, or shall we move ahead with the agenda? Yes.
Just one last, I just want to let the committee know that I do have another meeting at 11 and I will have to sign off of this committee. Just, it's not that I'm not interested.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 5. 5.1 is approval of the previous meeting minutes. And this was a recommendation that the minutes of November 5th be amended. And I wonder if Brittany, you could speak to that for us.
Absolutely. So last year, prior to the December meeting, Member Valleau pointed out an error in those minutes. And specifically, it is that item 6.1, as included in said minutes, be amended to include wording as follows. So changing the wording from provisions for the protection of natural hazards to provisions for the protection of natural carbon sinks, forest, and wetlands. So that's the amendment we're speaking of.
Thank you. Thanks for that reminder. And Danuta, that makes sense, that change in wording?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So can I have someone move that we accept and approve the November 5th meeting minutes as amended? Thanks, Bob. All in favor? And that carries. And then 5.2 is approval of the minutes from the November 19th meeting as they appear in the agenda package. Is there any discussion on those minutes, or can I have someone approve that move that we approve those minutes? Thank you, Anne. All in favor? Carried. All right. Moving on to delegations, I'm pleased to introduce Keith Reed from Grace Harbor Conservation Authority to speak to us today. I have heard Keith speak to his report as listed in the agenda package. It's a long title, but I was interested in Keith coming here to speak to us today too, because I think there's some nice crossover with some of the information in his report and our climate action and particularly in the area of agriculture in Georgian Bluffs, which we know is very important. So at that, Keith, welcome here today. We're happy to hear what you have to say about your report. Take it away.
Excellent, super. Do I have the ability to share my screen here?
I imagine so. Brittany is looking good.
Nope. Let's stop sharing. Okay.
We did see your desktop shared there,
Okay.
so that's a good sign. There we go. Perfect.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to this group. Kudos to the work that you're doing so far. I think you're ahead of some municipalities, and that's great to see. I can remember back in I think it was about 2017 or 2018. I remember hearing a show on CBC Radio where the interviewers were actually going back to Kingston Council and asking them what they had done after they had said that they were making a climate change or climate action and declaring that there was a climate emergency, and over a year had passed since that date, and there wasn't really a whole lot to report on. So I appreciate the work that you guys are doing here. Councillor Coburn had asked me to discuss the potential erosion risks in constructed drains. This is some of the work. My involvement is a farmer, first and foremost a farmer, but also work with the ALICE program and with Grace Harbor Conservation and the stewardship technician side. So the stewardship technician position within Grace Harbor started out the year with doing work with the Healthy Lake Huron group. And so part of their ask was doing some work on just kind of figuring out what the topography looks like and and where we sit. So this is the map, I think, that really got Councillor Coburn interested in me discussing this today. As you can see, the 4 conservation authorities that are on the Huron Fringe, we have very different aspects, and our topography is very different from that of further south. And so this is kind of what has driven my work this year. Though the red areas are very, very high and steeply sloping. So this is Laura Hopkins. She works within Maitland Valley Conservation. She's moved on since doing this, but she was really the one spearheading the mapping and how to get all of the information and data sets completed. And so she has been a great asset to making this happen. So a bit of the background, OMAFR provided the inherent water erosion potential mapping. And so this is the calculation that we used across all 4 different watersheds. And so the calculation for the universal soil loss equation, we use these 3 R, K, and L and S, which is the rainfall runoff factor, soil erodibility factor, and the slope length factor. The C and the P were not used. That is the crop and management factor and the support practice factor. And those are hard to equate on a whole watershed basin, but easier at a farm scale. So those were not used to come up with the information we have now. As part of Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada's potential soil erosion classes, when we did the data set across the 4 areas, this is the range of severe to very low erosion potential. And so the severe class is more than 33 tons of hectare per year of loss, and more than 15 tons. And to the very low of less than 6 tons per hectare per year. So when we look at, when we did that across, this is what happens, and those red areas are those severe areas. And you can see in the picture on the right-hand side, some of those areas could be going across farm fields. They could be areas that aren't farmed, and they could be areas that are already being protected. So there's those things to consider. So percent erosion class area. So out of those numbers, spits out 29% of our area is in that class. And when we look up at St. Clair Region Conservation, we see very different numbers. So we're in a very unique and different position. What is good though is that the land in permanent cover, meaning that those areas are, protected by either tree cover or grasses. We're still in those areas we're at 57% coverage. So that means that those are fairly protected areas, which is good. And when we look at the amount of the agriculture land that's in production in those areas, the overview, we determined that the amount of agriculture land in each erosion class using the AFC numbers. And we determined the amount of agriculture land in a 3+ crop rotation. So rotations with 3 or more crop families, or 3 or more years of perennial crops. So what that means is we're looking at a 3. In those agriculture fields, we just kind of wanted to see what that looked like. What were those areas being done? Like what was happening in those fields? So it could be a corn, soybean rotation, or 3 or more years of a perennial crop, which is in permanent cover. So when we break the 3+ crop rotation analysis into 3+ crop families, so that could be 3 different species, 3 different crops per year, or 3 different crops over those 3-year periods, 3+ years of pasture forages and 3+ years of perennial crops that aren't 3+ years of pastures and forages. So when we look at rotations that contain agriculture land use all 4 years of rotation, we can look at some of those areas aren't being farmed, so those non-agricultural land uses. They could be treed, they could be wetlands, they could be areas in urban development, they could be all kinds of things. And in the agricultural land use, we're looking at all of the different types of agriculture that happens. So a 3+ crop rotation adoption rate, rotations with 3 or more crop families or 3 or more years of perennial crops. So those crop families could be broadleaf legumes, which is the soybeans and peas, broadleaf non-legumes, which are the canola family, warm season grasses, which is the corn, cool season grasses, winter wheat, and the cereals, and mixture of hay and pasture. And so the perennial specialty crops, those areas did come out in the data set, which is berries, vineyards, orchards, etc. And the annual specialty crops, which isn't a huge area in our region or actually in all 4 CA, so they didn't make a huge impact, but those are potatoes, sugar beets, sunflower, and tobaccos and tomatoes. So when we look at that and we implement that data set into the mapping, you can see that the green areas are the 3+ crop rotation, and the red or the pink area is not 3+, and the red slashes through is those severe areas. So when we look at those, I think that's in the next slide, but when you look at those, the 3+ crop rotation adoption rate, and you break the 3+ crop rotations into the 3 crop families and the 3+ years of pasture forages and the 3+ years of perennial crops that aren't 3+ years of pasture and forages, we see that those areas that are in severe and not 3+ are those areas that are in the red. So those are of a little bit of concern. When we, this is just showing, and I can't see the top of my screen here. What is interesting though is that in our area, the GSCA, that 63% of that with the 3+ years of pasture and forages. So those are in permanent cover, even though we are utilizing, you know, our cropping systems have been changing up in our region. It's good to see that it's still 63% showing that permanent cover in there, so that's good. And 21% of that area in our region is in agriculture land that is doing a 3-year or a 3+ crop family rotation. So those are the areas that are being, you know, cash cropped or something that's vulnerable each fall, winter when we look at that data. So it's good to see that we still have that 63% in permanent cover. So what is kind of interesting though out of this, and I know I'm moving fast and probably some of you are a little bit confused of what's going on, but what is interesting is that in our region, typically we've been more, you know, a lot of cattle production, and I think that some of that reasoning for the cattle production is because of our area being so steep and not as easy to farm as the regions further south. But I think when I talk to and I see what's happening, we are seeing a bit of a change from, you know, livestock-based operations to more cash crop operations, which isn't all a bad thing, but it is of concern when we look at some of these areas that are severe. Those are, you know, areas that we need to really focus on how we manage those areas going forward for that erosion potential. And when we're looking at the whole region being so, you know, topography that is something similar to Peterborough, it is of concern. So we're interested in moving forward with some changes and engaging producers. The target setting for AAFC is their option for what they would want to see in those severe areas is basically what we're doing already is in permanent vegetation. And I think it was 63% that's at that point now, but I think that those numbers will change as we go forward. So in some cases it's not. I know that when we look at that permanent vegetation on the data set showing further south, that number isn't as good as what ours is. So that's because they're doing more cropping over that way. And then so in their high erosion class, they're looking, you know, a best management practice would be zero tillage, sod-based rotations, terraces, cross slope or contour strip cropping. In the moderate soil class, they would like to see conservation tillage, contour cropping, and grassed waterways. And in the low soil erosion class, they would like to see crop rotations and cross slope farming. And in the very low soils in this class have very slight to little or no erosion potential. So that's kind of the way that AAFC sees those lands. So the Healthy Lake Huron group decided that, well, maybe we target those grades and we kind of come up with a grading system, and look at, you know, how can we give them a grade of what is happening at the farm level. So 70 in that target grade of NA would be 70 to 100% of severely erodible land in permanent cover. B being 40 to 69% of severely erodible land in permanent cover, and right down to D, which is less than 19% of severely erodible land in permanent cover. I think that was that. What's interesting too is that OMAFRA, it also got the HLH group to do some mapping of some constructed drains. And so when we take this map and we see it against the topography map, we realize that we're completely opposite, and that's mainly because of the flat land needing, you know, municipal drains in order to get the water moving off the farmland to make the farms viable, and because the water is the erosion risk is high in our area, we also have no real municipal drain systems where the water can get away on its own. So which is bad for soil erosion, but you know, we're in an area where, as the farms are changing and further farmers from the south have been purchasing land up our way, and you know, that changes from our livestock-based operations to more cash crop operations. Those farmers are also used to working with a drainage inspector further south, and we don't have that the ability to have those drain systems. So as tile drains are being implemented, you know, we do see some issues with how the outlets are constructed and where they go, and does put strain on local municipalities. So that's something that we need to be cognizant of. When we look at best management practices that are happening in MVCA and Asable Bayfield, those areas of the erosion control projects that are happening in there are basically gully erosion and areas that are tiled, and you know, they're implementing wascobs and structures that are slowing the water down. So you know, I think it's in best interest that as tile draining is happening in our region, that we're doing some of those best management practices right at implementation stage, as opposed to erosion issues happening and then having to solve the problem after. As I said, you know, as farming practices change in our region, we can't focus that crop production is all that bad. When we look at farm level successes, and when I speak to, you know, the Rotary Group or any kind of other group that aren't farm related, the first thing that they all comment on is the tree lines coming out and the shelter belt, you know, disappearing. And I think we need to be cognizant of that and aware of that, but there also is great wins with some of these areas being cropped. Technology has really helped as far as nutrients being applied. It's also, you know, we're not having that overlap. And we also have the ability to benchmark, you know, acres that we can, you know, basically have an exact acre, and we know exactly what needs to be put on those acres. And then when we look at this picture on the right-hand side, that type of technology is where the color is red and to the green and to the yellow. There's actually a prescription of how that is placed on that land, and it's automatically there's clutches on everything. That all happens automatically, where the rate is put on based on the prescription and based on that land type. So you know, it's easy to point out the negative things, but it's also rewarding what's happening at the farm level, and we really need to be aware of that as well. So stewardship projects in marginal areas, for those of you that aren't aware of what ALICE is, it stands for Alternative Land Use Services, and this is a program that we can take marginal areas and in this example would be something that's very steeply sloping, and take those areas out of production and enroll them in ALICE, and the farmer then would actually get an annual payment on the acres that are taken out of production. And so these are producers coming forward with these projects, and so we're seeing lots of tree plantings on highly sloping areas. We're seeing fencing of waterways, and lots of different projects and different initiatives coming forward. This is a tree planting next to an area next to the river that is taken out of production that used to be pastured right up to. And the importance of cover crops in those areas that are being cropped. If we can have a permanent cover going into winter, there's less chance of erosion, but also healthier soil and more carbon uptake, all of that great stuff. We're able to in our area, if you're able to diversify and have crop production and beef cattle or any type of livestock, you have the ability to have extra feed produced on these areas, which many producers are taking advantage of. Also, we conducted a survey of 40 different producers, and it was basically to kind of figure out, because there's the importance of having beef cattle on the landscape, having those permanent areas, those permanent covers on those areas that are steeply sloping. Looking at what can we do to help, or is there opportunities for those operations to continue? And so we had gleaned some valuable information out of it as well. And these are we'll just go quickly, but this is an interesting scenario that there's only 17% of the beef farmers that we surveyed that actually have, that don't rely on an off-farm income. So that speaks to some, the ability that the farms are, tight margins, and we are, it is a tough occupation, and so that kind of gleans out some really interesting information that producing food, we still have to support our jobs, or the beef operation, with another job, which is interesting. So out of those producers, the size of the farm is the blue area is basically the most common, which is just under the 250 acres. And the green area is the 34%, which is the 250 to 500 acres. And 9% of that, which probably relates to also to the percentage that don't have off-farm income, but those are 1,000 acre plus beef operations, which is 9%. What's interesting is, Gray and Bruce, the preferred pasturing system is 49% people answered that they would be interested in cover crop grazing. And so that's interesting as well. 30% already are doing rotational grazing, one field at a time. So they're letting the cattle in, letting the cattle out, and giving that area a chance to rest. And also the interesting thing is that of all these producers that were polled, they already have best management practices and things that they would like to do and complete on their farms, which is great for. It's always hard to get adoption rates and farmers to be involved in these things, and I think that speaks to some of that the time as well. If we're working, if there's already producers working 40 hours a week off somewhere else, money is obviously tight, and those projects just always seem to get shifted and never really happen. So thank you, and I apologize. I know it's quick, but I wanted to get through it all, and just I think that as far as climate change and the ability for the farmers to be a part of that, I think there's a great opportunity. And I think that, I guess the takeaway is that I want to make sure that, farmers are being seen for the good things that they're doing, not necessarily the bad things. And if we're going to engage farmers in the carbon and climate change talks, I think we really need to reward the things that we're already doing. And so I'm hopeful that we can have agriculture and have carbon, those climate talks with the agriculture producers, because I do think there's a lot that we can offer. So I would love to entertain any questions, and thank you for your invitation to your meeting today.
Thank you very much, Keith. I certainly, every time I hear you give this presentation, I think I'm learning a little bit more. It's technical and there's lots of data and information. It's a lot to take in. There are concerns definitely with the erosion and drainage risks. But at the same time, as you point out, there are lots of things that we're doing right and we can build upon. So thank you very much. I'll just open the floor up for questions for Keith, and we'll start with Danuta.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Oh, good. Okay. I should have been muted. Thanks, Keith. I'm a bit of a newbie, so it might be a silly question, but can you tell me whether the practice of tiling is a good thing or not?
Sure.
For drainage.
Yeah, so I know that there's there's good things and there's bad things about tiling. I think that the issue, I guess, is that it makes water flow faster, because water is exiting in one small place or two small places on a farm size operation. So that water is moving quicker. But it also does allow for more sponge ability within the field itself. So it makes that top area between the surface of the ground and the tile actually more permeable for water to infiltrate through. So if tile draining is constructed properly and the outlets are done in a way that they're safe and that it works, then I do believe that there is more advantages to tiling than not. But there is, obviously each operation or each farm would probably have, depending on what their slope is, I think there's different scenarios. So it's kind of hard to say whether it's good or bad. It is expensive for anyone that's implementing the cost of it in. And so those costs are, obviously outweighing that it's an investment for that operation to put those in to make it more productive. But I think that there's pros and there's cons for tile draining for sure.
Yeah, great question. And I imagine, Keith, that the other side of the tile drainage on farms is then the ability for the municipality to take that excess water that's draining quickly and find a way to manage that as well. Other questions? Bob?
Yeah, I just have two questions, I guess, Keith. I was wondering what your opinions are on low tillage, how it works in this area, and if farmers are on board with that or not. And also, do you have reasonable data in terms of the different types of farms that we have in this area? Like, I know you're looking at the beef producers, but we also have dairy and sheep and cash croppers and that sort of thing. So do you have stats or mapping on that?
Yeah, so Statistics Canada you can get all that information and by region. I don't have the exact numbers, but I have gone through them before. OMAFRA has some data as well. I think the main thing is that the livestock operations are are going by the wayside, basically because of the economic piece. But there, you know, I think even, well, I'm from Annan, and I think that there used to be, I think there was over 20 dairies, and now there's 2. And I think that the municipality of Meaford as a whole only has 3 or 4 dairy operations, which is just overwhelming to actually think about that. So, you know, the food system is kind of changing, and we're making, you know, economic decisions and everything. You know, this larger farm sizes it's kind of going that way. What was the other question? I think that there's lots of work being implemented with no-till. No-till is a lot to do with your soil type as well. If you're in a heavy clay and that area is wet, it doesn't close, and then you have a bare trench that the seed will actually die in because it won't germinate. And to Danuta's question, actually, if you really want a system of no-tilling to work, you almost have to have it in a tile drain system to have that even water distribution. So that's something that is to note too as well. But a lot of it is to do with soil type and how successful those operations are with minimum or no tillage. And lots of producers are actually implementing where they're planting into a green cover crop. So that's there's lots of interesting data to watch on that as well. So as a whole, it's the industry is going to, you know, looking at all of that stuff, and I think that as a whole, I think the industry is really looking at implementing all of that stuff and how it can work better.
Thank you.
And over to you, Luke.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. Really wonderful presentation on both the erosion piece and the allos piece. I have 2 related questions. One is, I think we all recognize the critical importance of farmers when we talk about farming, when we talk about climate change. And I think we're all, those of us who are not farming, are all struggling a little bit about what it actually means. And to your point, you know, how can farmers be part of the solution as opposed to being seen as part of the problem? And I also link that to the comment from the new CEO in terms of punitive action doesn't work. It's really about rewards and in providing incentives. So 2 questions. One is, what would you see as constructive ways to get that and to broaden that engagement with the farming community? Of course, you are consistently coming up as the access point or the entry point for that discussion, but how can we broaden that discussion? And related to that, we are now part of we are the subcommittee to the council, to the municipality. What can the municipality do? Do you have any suggestions what the municipality can do to actually either provide those incentives or to broaden that discussion?
Yeah, so those are great points, and I don't know whether I can answer that or not. I know I had this discussion with Trevor Donald, you know, earlier, and I think it becomes the reason it's so difficult to get farmer engagement is because there's so within each industry there's such a difference. Not to mention the fact that, you know, we have dairy, we have beef, we have cash crop, but we have different sizes, we have different you know, different goals within each industry. So we're dealing with, you can't just say, how do we engage a farmer? Because that farmer has very many different hats or different, yeah, you get what I'm saying. So, and I think I used the example with Trevor, you know, going down the Sunset Strip, you have the Ford dealership, you have the GM dealership, and within each you have, you know, you can buy a truck, you can buy an SUV, you can buy a van, or you can drive an electric vehicle or buy an electric vehicle. So within each dealership or within each industry, there is, you know, the dairy that milks 250 cows, and there's the tie stall operation that has been milking 25 cows for the last 30 years. So those all have different views, and their time commitment is different as well. So I think our region is on the right path because we're, we have the agriculture, we have Alice involved in the community, and we've been in the community for 9 years, and we've got 850 acres retired. The best way to engage the farmer is have something that's consistent and have buy-in from producers that we can use as demonstration, demonstration sites, and they really do respect their peers for doing different things. The minute that you have, an Alice project on something on a farm that's doing 8 or 10,000 acres, people really look to that because they really understand, well, why would they do that? They're, looks like from the road, they're really committed to production and the bottom line. And when you have, someone that's planting trees that's also doing 8,000 acres of cash crop, though we can really make it a consistent and a really great picture to what that looks like to other farmers. As far as the local government or the county or whoever in being involved, I think that there's an opportunity to offset some monies towards projects like this, and to be involved, and either through the Conservation Authority or a program like Alice. We're already involved in the community and gaining that trust, and we. This producer survey was 40 producers, 38 of them responded back, and I text messages them all. And within minutes, I had 38 responses. So they need to have trust, and they need to be listened to. And the last thing they need to hear, I think, is my comments earlier, is that they're part of the problem. And I know that, the county just had a plan come out, and when farmers read it, they scuffed it off because they realized that they were the biggest contributor to climate change. So, so we can't engage a group when we're blaming that group, right? So we need to really go in with a different approach of how we access that community.
Yeah, excellent points, for sure. Thank you. Was there anything else there, Luke? Excellent. Okay, over to you, Anne.
Yeah, and I agree with what Trevor or what Keith is saying. And to that point, I think the farmers themselves are working really, really hard at addressing this problem. And I just wanted to mention that the Grey County Ag Services actually has a seminar on January 29th, focusing on greenhouse gas emissions with relation to animal products. So, I mean, they're very clearly working on this. It's and we need to figure out how to join with them rather than blame them.
Exactly. Yep, for sure. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think you can pick up any Ontario Farmer paper or anything with that in it, and it's all, greenhouse gas. It's climate. It's very involved, and it's really taking hold. But on the same side, I know that I can remember as a kid, them talking about, if you plant using a no-till drill, that you could be paid for, a carbon in the 80s. So, I mean, we're also being, kind of led on that there's an opportunity for climate change and for the farmer to be part of that solution. But really, nothing has really come to fruition to this point. So we're at a point now where there is investment, and everybody is really, their ears are up to listening to this. So.
Yeah, that's encouraging. Over to you, Trevor.
I just wanted to thank Keith for taking the time to come and address the group. I spoke to introduced myself to countless stakeholders within the region, and Keith picked up the phone and called me right away. Some individuals didn't even get back to me, but and I approached Keith not from Grey Sauble conservation angle. I approached him through the Alice angle because I see the work that they're doing. It's incredible. And I think, like Keith was saying, farmers need to be recognized as they're really experts in this agroclimate field. And agroclimate is going to be, I feel, a huge buzzword going into 2022, especially with supply chain issues and what we saw happen in BC that really affected farmers in Abbotsford. And there's going to be a huge ramp up, and I'm hoping in Southern Ontario we see the same thing. It's really hard when, as Keith was saying, farmers are seen as, you know, being the problem, but there are issues. For example, if a crop or product is produced, let's say in Grey or Bruce County, and is transported to, let's say, downtown Toronto to Bathurst Street, then it's not Bathurst Street or Toronto that gets those emissions. It's all attributed to Grey and Bruce County, even though those goods are being sold in Shoppers Drug Mart downtown Toronto. And that's kind of an issue that I think needs to be addressed going forward. But as agroclimate and these supply chains issues become more forward because of the media and the work that Alice is doing and getting it recognized, I think it's going to be pretty tremendous. And I think there's a huge opportunity there. I think the group recognizes that as well. And just thank you, Keith, for taking the time.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you, Trevor. And I would just echo that as well. I don't see any other hands up. Deputy Mayor Carlton, I'll go over to you next.
Sorry, thank you, Chair Coburn. Just a comment that Danuta brought up about the tillage. It is something that the drainage superintendent for the township has brought up to council in the past, that when farmers are putting in tile drainage, we need to be aware of where that's going to drain, because if it's going into a roadside ditch, it could become quite an issue. If it's directed to the municipal drains, we need to make sure those are open and ready to receive that extra water going in. So it might be worth maybe asking Ian Erickson for some input there as well, if we think that tile drainage and municipal drains are an issue, because he's the drainage superintendent for the township. So that's my only comment. Thank you. And thank you, Keith. Very interesting presentation.
Super. Yeah, no, I think from what I'm learning and kind of seeing, that as these tile drain companies are coming up, they're losing, like, they don't have that infrastructure that they're used to. So I think there is a real conversation, and I would love to be in, if there's a drainage superintendent, I would love to have that conversation with them. And I think that we can work too, like, depending on funding, but if there's an opportunity to put in, you know, like a sediment pond, or, you know, to hold some of that water back, tile outlet into those fields, from the field structure into a holding pond, you know, those are excellent projects that we can do. And we have the ability to do that in our region because of our sloping topography. So we have those areas that we can hold some water back and you know, let it go at a lesser rate type of thing. So those projects are exciting, and I think that we can really use those to our benefit. So we'd really like to do some of that stuff. They're doing some of that stuff further south, and you know, holding water back on municipal drains, you know, and so they're really doing a lot. And that's kind of what I spoke to. I would really like to implement some of these projects into the design stage, as opposed to having issues and then doing you know, kind of doing them after the fact. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, really good point. As stormwater management continues to be a challenge for our municipality and likely all others in Ontario. So all good points. I would just thank you again, Keith, for taking the time to come and present to us today, and hopefully we'll continue to learn about the agricultural community and how that pertains to climate change, and how we can partner with those folks. And yeah, I imagine you'll be in touch with Trevor as our work continues at this committee level for sure. So thanks again.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so
I just had something flash up, Brittany, that said we only have 5 minutes left in our scheduled meeting. We're not going to be kicked out? Right?
No, you're fine. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Moving on to number 7, which is correspondence. There's a collection of several resources that have been circulating amongst the committee members that are here for us all to see. I don't know if there's any discussion that anyone wishes to bring forward in any of those items. The first one listed the value of trees, which is I think it builds upon or borrows some of the information that John has provided in the past, which is good to see. I do believe Odette is also working on a spreadsheet that might be useful to staff. I think she's compiling a list of all of the municipalities locally who have implemented tree cutting bylaws. I think it's still a work in progress, but it is, I know that's something that we had taken back to our council, and I believe we're expecting a report to come forward on that. So I don't know if that would be helpful to staff or not, but she is working on that as well. Any items to be pulled from correspondence for discussion? Seeing none. So we just, we don't need a motion then, Brittany, we'll just accept that as information. And moving on to staff reports. So the operations update, I will turn this over to Steve. And if you could just tag on the bit about the trails plan and how you see this committee's role in that at the end, that would be helpful. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Chair Coburn. Through you, Chair Coburn, to committee, just to give you guys an update on where we are with the Trails Working Group. Staff are drafting the terms of reference for the working group to assist council in informing a wide-scale and strategic vision for trail use throughout the township. We would like to bring all perspectives to the table, including a member of this group, to lend a climate lens to the overall scope of the project. Upon drafting the terms of reference, we will connect with the committee members to gauge interest. So we'll be coming back to you guys once the term of references have been drafted. We anticipate inviting 1 to 2 members of this group to participate in the working group for trails. We'll be back with an update no later than February of this year. So we're currently drafting them, and we'll be bringing back an update at the next CAC meeting.
Okay, excellent. Sounds like there's already been a lot of thought and movement put into that already, Steve. So that's super. And was it your hand I saw up or Danuta's? No, neither one. Okay. So that's great. That's coming along. No questions about that, then carry on, Steve.
Thank you. So in regards to the next items within the operations updates here, I am going to pass the floor over to Trevor, who will talk to you about the consultant that we had our kickoff meeting on Monday afternoon. So I will be passing the floor to Trevor.
Thank you. And over to you, Trevor.
Good morning, and through the chair to the committee. So we did provide you with a work plan. I'm in the process of updating the work plan to include the notice of motions that you have mentioned. I am working on a report to present to this committee that will draft a bylaw that will go to council on the notice of motions that were brought forward, or the notice of motion that was brought forward, as well as I'm also working with Brian, and we're also preparing a report as well to speak to another agenda item, which is the green bins, and we're looking at waste management within Georgian Bluffs, and I will be applying a climate lens to that work. So that will also go into the work plan. So I'm adding those 2 items. As well as we had a conversation with NII, which I saw in the email chatter, there was some interest there. So we're exploring a possible workshop that we could do with NII through their new program. I did sit on Saugeen Shores last night, and they're making use of the program. And I see the potential here in Georgian Bluffs as well. We did meet with the consultant for the first time on Monday. I think the timeline has obviously moved, and that was mentioned in our November meeting. The consultant has adopted the new timeline, and we've shifted it over. So we have until approximately mid to end of July, so a 6-month period to put together that corporate plan. And so that new timeline will be reflected in the work plan that we provided with you guys earlier. So you will get an updated work plan that will include the consultant. The meeting on Monday was very preliminary. It was introductions. We were very pleased with the preparation that the consultant provided in terms of what was specified in the RFP. And then we asked them to do a presentation to this committee next month. So as a delegation, so they will do exactly what Keith just did earlier, and you'll be able to put questions. And then we can decide as a committee, when the consultant comes back each month to this committee, how do we want to engage the consultant, just as you guys engage with operations and have your questions and expectations as well. And that will help form the corporate plan. Speaking to what Cynthia said earlier, the consultant is aware of Grey County's plan. Grey County has kind of identified that plan as kind of a kitchen sink plan where it's hugely comprehensive. But as you guys have mentioned as well, there's a lot of question marks as to how that plan is going to be implemented. So the consultant and ourselves will identify priority areas for the corporate plan instead of this very comprehensive kitchen sink approach. As Cynthia pointed out, this is a way to move a little bit quicker rather than getting bogged down and having such a comprehensive plan. And then we're also looking at a whole of government approach. So for example, the notice of motion that's brought forward on trees, I'll be sitting in meeting with planning, for example, and we'll be talking. Same with the consultants and the corporate plan. We're implementing a whole of government approach, and the consultant is aware that, for example, when they're speaking to the planning department, that's 2 individuals, or if they're speaking to the treasurer, that's also 2 individuals, or if they're speaking to the administration for operations, yeah, that's 2 individuals. So it's not a whole department of 16 individuals, and they're well aware of that. And so we'll be able to work forward with that. If there are any questions, I'd be willing to answer those.
Okay, Anne, go ahead.
One comment, because you referenced one motion that's being worked on, and my recollection is there's actually 2 motions or notice of motions that this committee has put forward, so that's a comment. The other is a question just for an acronym. You mentioned, I'm not sure whether it was NMI or MMI, and I'm not sure what you were referring to.
Yeah, I wondered the same thing. I think, Trevor, you said NII, and I just wondered what that was as well.
Sure, through the committee to the member. NII is the Nuclear Innovation Institute. I believe that was brought up in email correspondence, and I believe that is who Saugeen is working with through the NII's new program, which is a net zero program. So it seems in our initial conversation with them that they're making resources available in terms of funding for workshops and things along those lines. And I can't remember from the email correspondence who suggested that Georgian Bluffs do the same, but John. So in our initial conversation, they actually asked what we would be interested in for for a workshop.
Okay, great. Thank you. Does that answer your question, Anne? Yeah, perfect. Okay, Luke.
Yeah, two questions, Trevor. One is, so we know now that we need to know that the corporate baseline will be end of July. What's this? Are we still on track to get the municipal baseline done by the end of April, as we previously understood was the case? That's the first one. And then the second one is, by the end of July, do we have the baseline, or are we? Is it more of the larger plan, the corporate side?
Sure. So through the chair to the member. So as I guess mentioned before, so we're using county data for the community plan, which is coming from 2018, and our baseline for the corporate plan is 2019. The consultant has been provided with the 2019 raw data, and that Department of Energy has that posted on their website as well as they have the report that was prepared by Zach Carson. That report will have to be updated. It mentions the older OREG, and it will have to be updated to mention the new OREG, which is the Ontario regulation, which falls under the Department of Energy, as the old Ontario regulation was rescinded by the provincial government. But the consultant has been provided with that information in terms of what our corporate energy usage and emissions are at present. And the consultant has been provided with information that we would want to be able to easily do our reporting to the government each year, as well as meet targets that will be set, and that this reporting will be easily done because of staff constraints at the moment. And so the consultant is working to help us make an intuitive, streamlined approach to doing that, so we could do it year after year and ensure that we're meeting our targets.
Sorry, if I may, I think, Luke, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were asking more about timelines and what will be produced by those target dates that you mentioned, Trevor.
Yeah, and also the municipal plan as opposed to the corporate plan. And I think the underlying issue is a little bit like, and not to beat a dead horse, but I think it would be so helpful for us to have a bit of a sense about where we are in this process. And it's great to hear what the plans are. I think it's also great what actually has been achieved. And I just think it's difficult for us to have a good view on what's the process and where are we in the process, and what, for example, has changed since our last meeting in November. And I think that's kind of, I really appreciate all the efforts that go into it. And I know it's difficult to deal with multiple players, but what my recollection was that we initially started with a baseline by the end of April, both on the corporate side and on the municipal side. The corporate side will be done by the consultants through the RFP. The municipal side will be led by Trevor. So I'm just trying to see where we are we still on schedule? And if not, and there are obstacles, is there anything that this committee can do to help move that process forward?
Yeah, great questions. I see Steve's hand is up, so maybe Steve can provide us with some clarification around expected deadlines and where we're at, as Luke says. Go ahead, Steve.
We are on schedule for our deadlines that we had originally set in motion.
Can you just I think your volume's a little off. Sorry, Steve.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Okay. Through you, Chair Coburn, to the committee. We are still on the set schedules here, set timelines that we had originally proposed. When the consultant comes to do their presentation, they'll be giving you more of a detailed schedule approach as well, like a Gantt chart showing where they are within the steps, what items they're looking for. They're going to give us a list of information that they require from us. So that is going to be also shared with this committee here, so that if you have information that can help us out with it, that's going to generate as well. We will be providing you with a proper Gantt/schedule detailed report of where we're falling as well from a project management point of view as well. So we're currently on the same schedules. It's looking good. So that's where we're at right now.
I'm just going to go back to you, Luke, just to make sure we have the information.
Yeah, thank you. Just Steve, just to confirm, that's both for the corporate side as well as for the municipal side. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and sorry, Luke, when you say municipal side, when you say municipal, I think corporate. So
Oh, sorry.
Maybe for ease of understanding, we're talking corporate and then community. Does that language work for everybody?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks for that clarification. And so I think what will be very helpful if during that meeting we can also then see the Gantt chart for the community side. I think that's what we were looking for in terms of a work plan, in terms of what are the steps, and a Gantt chart would be fantastic. And that basically, because the last work plan we have, actually we had of course the milestone that you provided, but the last version was still that kind of that matrix that we had in September last year. And I don't know if there's anything other than the milestones that provides an overview of these different steps. So again, chart will be phenomenal.
Yes, we'll make sure we have that to you guys.
Perfect. And Trevor, I think, was it you or maybe Steve mentioned, or no, I think it was you, Trevor, that we have the work plan, but I maybe I've missed it, but I don't see that as part of the agenda today. So I'm feeling a little fuzzy about timelines as well, and where we are with things, because I don't believe that was included in this agenda package. So Luke, is that good from your perspective? Okay, moving over to Danuta then. Go ahead, Danuta.
Thank you. No, I guess I put my hand up a little while ago, so maybe I think we've probably arrived at that point where I feel as if I've got dark glasses on and I can't see what we're talking about. So I think as a committee member, I feel like I could contribute so much more if I can see a work plan and we're working on it together. And so I must admit to some frustration. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. When it's a lot to take in, and when we don't see it visually, and we're trying to put dates and comments together, it can be challenging for sure. So thank you for being honest, Danuta. Anne, or did staff want to respond to Danuta's comment, or nothing at this time? Okay, so I'm going to move over to Anne.
Yeah, I echo what I think Danuta and Luke are saying. I think the last work plan that we actually saw, and I may be wrong on this, but I think it was actually tabled in one of the October meetings, and it was from the climate action plan. I think it was Steve's operations plan, but the climate action part was integrated into that plan. But the climate action part was really, really scant on detail, and really all it had was kind of targets for the PCP milestone 1, 2, and so on, but it wasn't broken out. And at that last time it was tabled, there was again a discussion about how to integrate that plan with the other action plan that the committee had actually generated, and it was going to come back, but I don't think it ever did come back. So I don't think at this point we've got a fulsome integrated plan that we can look at and say, yep, this is happening, because we don't actually have that plan.
Yeah, fair enough. I wonder, why don't we ask Carly or Brittany to make this particular item number 1 after the general business for our next meeting? Why don't we make this topic number 1, and we can nail down some of the particulars, take a closer look at the updated work plans, and feel as though we have a better sense of where we've come and where we're headed for the next scheduled meeting. Does that sound okay with the committee? And yes, and over to you, Brittany.
Thank you, Chair Coburn. And I just wanted to note, I hear your frustrations, and I thank the committee for making them well known. I think now that we're working with the consultant, we'll see a better definition of that work plan, especially defined metrics as to when we will move through each milestone associated with each program that this committee has identified as a priority. So I think while we can definitely include that project plan that this committee is currently discussing on the next agenda, I think that's the role that the consultant will play a large portion of at your next meeting, in appropriately identifying where we are and how we're going to achieve the milestones that we discussed in November.
Okay, thank you. Anne, does that suffice for now? Other comments?
So thank you to that, Brittany. And I think you're right. I think that what my understanding is the consultant has been hired to work on the corporate plan. So I think we will have a lot of clarity from the consultants when we come to the next meeting. What I still wonder about is the community plan, because that is not under the bailiwick of the consultants. That's with Trevor, and I feel less clear or less kind of sense of what that action plan is. So thanks.
Go ahead, Brittany.
Thank you. And as you heard at the beginning of this meeting, our new CAO has a lot of lived experience with both corporate and community plans, and has been assisting us in the back end to ensure that we have everything mapped out appropriately to meet this committee's achieved or defined goals. So leave it with us. We will sit down and try and make it a more comprehensive, easy to follow document for this committee to digest, and not only for this committee, but for the public as well.
Perfect. Thank you. That sounds great. Any other questions for Trevor or Steve at this time before we move on? Seeing none, I'm not aware of any questions that have come forward from the public, and nothing under unfinished business, I don't believe. So under new business, I had asked that we bring the green bin question forward, largely because I have been contacted by a couple of ratepayers who have become aware of this committee and its work, and want to encourage us to look at compost options going forward. So I don't know that we need to have a big conversation about this at this time. Trevor has alluded to it, and I know Steve's well aware. It's also sort of inextricably linked with the biogrid and the biodigester plan, I would think, as well. So we need some way of, it's not just a matter of collecting green bin contents, it's a matter of what we do with it when we do accept that. So it's part of a bigger picture. It's on the radar. I just wanted to do my due diligence in bringing that forward on behalf of some ratepayers who are asking for this service. And I think, not to put the cart before the horse, but we need to be very thoughtful about decisions like this, because a large part of our population does not live in an urban type of setting, and they have the option of taking their kitchen waste and tossing it, on their property somewhere, and effectively dealing with compost on their own. So it'll have to be a thoughtful decision, and again, as I say, it's tied to the whole biogrid question. Which, as you all know, is run by a board. So it's a little bit beyond even our council in terms of some of that decision making. So that's that. John, I see your hand up. I'll turn that over to you next.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. I was paying attention to Trevor's comments, but I'm just for clarification, did we actually get a agenda item 8.3, the update of the community of practice? Because I was very much looking forward to that, and I just must have missed it if it was embedded in there.
No, you're right. I may have skipped over that, and I do apologize for that. Will we go back? Is it okay procedurally to go back to Trevor or Steve to 8.3? And thank you, John, for pointing that out. Is there an update about the county climate action community of practice meeting? Anything there to share with us, Trevor?
Yes, Madam Chair, and as well, I can combine 8.3 with 11.2, as I have talked to Linda about 11.2. As we are meeting, the county and the member municipalities are meeting tomorrow, so I could perhaps answer 11.2 as well. So I can give you, if the group would want, I can give you the attendance of the December 1st meeting. Is that something that the group wants?
Okay.
Sure. So it was myself, Randy with Grey County, the deputy CAO, Linda Swanson, of course, Scott Taylor, manager of planning services, Brian Tockery, Hanover CEO, Rick Chappelle, Owen Sound supervisor environmental services, Kayla Best, Southgate CAO, Jeffrey Fletcher, Blue Mountain manager of sustainability and solid waste, Laura Johnson, West Grey CAO, Cody Hewlett, West Grey Corporate and Community Initiatives Officer, Brady Carbert, Meaford Manager, Assets and Technology Services, Rob Voigt, Meaford Director of Development Services. So that just gives you the idea of the variety of staff that sit on this as member municipalities. So we discussed how municipalities were looking at doing climate action. Some municipalities were able to access modernization funding for asset management. We accessed modernization funding, I believe, for the biodigester, but some municipalities are now looking at how can they incorporate asset management with climate action in the modernization funding they've received. And that was modernization funding comes from the province. And there was different payouts of that as well. Some municipalities, as we are in the process of updating their official plans and considering addressing climate change within the updated plans. So that is something that is happening as well. Some municipalities expressed that there's currently not a lot of capacity in smaller municipalities to create a standalone climate action plan. So that is why they're looking at if they can do climate action within asset management or within the official plans. Owen Sound does not yet have a dedicated staff person, has delegated a lot of actions in their corporate adaptation plan to staff, and has created a landing page for climate change on its website. And I guess you guys are aware because you interact with Owen Sound a lot. West Grey has approved from council to create an environment and capital project position. Hiring likely won't be until Q2. And West Grey awarded ICLEI the tender for the development of their climate action plan. Grey County has completed a community engagement for the draft action plan. And this is old information, and I imagine Deputy Mayor Carlton is well aware of this because it's probably already happened. So they discussed a task force, and then they've put out that information. County put out an RFP for the new Rockwood Terrace long-term care home in Durham and specified the design be net zero ready. Other example of building projects in the county taking into climate change is the Attainable Housing Project in Thornbury. And as well, Grey County is looking to build a new ambulance base that would take into account net zero. And I don't know the specifics of these projects. I'm sure the CAOs of the other member municipalities and as well as you guys as well are well aware of these building projects. I'm just coming on board in my 6 months to getting acquainted with long-term care and other projects like that as well. So that is the update. And so tomorrow, the county has asked me to present how the Georgian Bluffs is doing to the member municipalities in terms of this having a committee, a coordinator, and a consultant to do the work. And I imagine a lot of CAOs will be very interested because they're working on the corner of their desk on climate action. And they'll be very interested to see, okay, if we do make this a file within our municipality, how do we go about doing that and what is the best way to do it? And then I could speak to 11.2 unless there are questions to 8.3.
Yeah, I just, Member Carlton's hand's been up for a while. Did you want to jump in here, Sue, or do you want to wait until Trevor's done with the rest of that report?
No, let Trevor go ahead. My comment had to do with the green bin one, so I can wait until we're back to that one.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, Trevor, go ahead.
So for the revised County of Grey Climate Action Plan 9 strategies, so the county is providing new information. There'll be likely an update to the strategies presented in the draft climate action plan, but the 11 recommendations in the engagement report are not strategies per se. So that was the information provided to me. And so I could ask for clarification at the community practice meeting tomorrow if there's direction provided here as to what clarification is needed.
I see heads nodding, Trevor. So yeah, any clarification? Do you need more specifics?
Yeah, so if, for example, John could provide me with specific questions, I could direct them to the county or any members or the committee as a whole.
All right, what are we looking for, if anything? John, I thought I saw you about to raise your hand. Feel free.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think this is of great interest from our perspective, because with the Owen Sound group, we had specifically asked Linda if she would address the dependence between county and lower tiers in terms of climate action and how much assistance was there, and so on. So she was speaking to that in her presentation. And as we know, and as our new CAO has pointed out, we really have to direct our energies. I mean, this is a huge task that we're undertaking here. It's going to take a long time, and we have to focus. And having partnerships is going to be one of the most important things there, and the county will be an important partner. So the strategies that I sent to the committee that she listed in her presentation, we understood were those key areas where these kind of partnerships are going to go ahead most productively right now. If Trevor could clarify that, that would be great. I'll also point out that in the Grey County, I guess it's still a draft plan, but they have strategies under the community sector, and then they have a separate set of strategies under the corporate sector. And these strategies are all the community sector. So a second question I would ask Trevor to ask is there an opportunity for partnerships under the corporate strategies? Thank you.
Thank you. Does that give you enough to go on, Trevor?
Yes, and to the chair, to the member, if you would like to send an email with those questions as you pose them, I will ask them directly just as you pose them.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other questions for Trevor to take forward on our behalf? I guess if you think of any, maybe fire an email off to Trevor, but your meeting is tomorrow. Is that correct, Trevor?
That's correct. And I just also wanted to point out as well, in the email chatter and when things are put forward, staff go into, I guess, for example, even this agenda, we go in as staff, myself, Steve, Brian, and the operations team, we kind of go into overdrive to make sure that we are well prepared. And as well in the email chatter. So if a subject is brought up, for example, John's suggestion for trees funding or NII, immediately I spend time doing research. I call the people up that need to be called up. I do the emails. And so there's work that goes into that. And so even going into the meeting tomorrow, I have the agenda, I've talked to Linda, and I'm preparing myself today. So, and I hope the committee recognizes that work that happens with such a small administration.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that reminder. Okay. So that, Trevor, is that it from you then for 11.2 and the summary that you provided from 8.3. We're good to move on?
Yes, Madam Chair, yeah, we're good.
Okay, thank you. Let's go back to the green bin comment for a second and capture Member Carlton's comments before we move on to 11.3 then, if that's okay, Sue?
That's fine, thank you. My question had to do with not the green bin so much. Danuta had mentioned at one of our earliest meetings a different type of compost bin that also took the meat scraps and such. And I know we had put that on a list somewhere to be looked at. I would like to see, perhaps, if possible, those purchased so that they could be dealt with at the township the same way as our regular compost bins are. I just wondered where we are at with that.
Yeah, great question.
Part of my reason in asking is for all of us who live out in the country and who use compost bins and who wouldn't use that green bin, but I really don't want raccoons and such coming in around close to my home. So I'd like a different compost bin as well. So thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing that back. I know several months ago I had emailed, I think it was Steve, and asked if I could purchase one. I guess for some reason we've been talking about it and I assumed that we had them available. And I think Steve said we were going to be looking into it at that time, but then I never heard back. So Brittany, do you have some clarification around that for us?
I do. So I believe what Deputy Mayor Carlton and yourself, Chair Coburn, are referring to is what Trevor and Brian are working on a report to this committee about to facilitate that. So I anticipate that coming hopefully at your next meeting.
Excellent. Okay, perhaps we can have that noted as an agenda item for follow-up for the next meeting then as well. And Danuta, did you have a question or comment?
I just wanted to say that I've heard also that South Bruce Peninsula is now supplying green cones or has them available for their population. So that's even closer to home for people to purchase from the township.
Exactly. All right, well, we'll look forward to hearing that in the report for the February meeting as well. And thanks for clarifying that, Brittany. Okay, I think we will move on to new business 11.3, and this is in regards to possible participation in the Community Carbon Footprint Challenge. And I will turn that over to Anne.
Thank you, Chair Coburn. The Carbon Footprint Challenge is a program or project that's been initiated by the Collingwood Climate Action Team. And they are working with Project Neutral, who has developed a carbon footprint that individuals can use. The Georgian Bluffs Climate Action Team has joined the Footprint Challenge and have a team. They've actually now developed a logo and they have developed a slogan, which is not bluffing. So just to let you know, we're moving ahead. But the Carbon Footprint Challenge is a really, really good tool to do community engagement. So we don't want it to end with just our team that we have developed, and we're looking at building on the team. I think we've got 9 to 10 or so members currently involved. There is a Carbon Footprint Challenge team in Owen Sound. And there's one starting on the shoreline, Lake Huron shoreline. Collingwood is probably the group that has moved it the furthest. And so they've got numbers of teams actually working together to do the challenge. But what's really wonderful, and this is why I'm tabling it here, is that they have municipal councillors that are a team doing the challenge, and they have municipal staff doing the challenge as a team. And I'm wondering about whether this committee could explore whether the Carbon Footprint Challenge could be a tool that could be used to do community engagement, which is step one of kind of developing a community carbon action or community climate action plan. And it's a tool that's already been designed for us. The work has been done. We just need to figure out how to get folks on board. And getting kind of council on board, getting staff on board, getting this committee on board and promoting it, I think we could do some really good stuff around getting our Georgian Blessed community engaged in this process. So I have some information about the footprint challenge if you've got any questions about it, but more I would like us to talk about, is this a tool that this committee can use to kind of do more engagement?
Thank you, Anne. I think it sounds like a great idea to me. I know, if I may, off the top of my head, I wonder a couple of things. First of all, is there a deadline by which a team would have to enter and complete certain tasks, or is it more of an open, ongoing process? And the second question I have is, I have to be honest, when I hear something like that, I'm hesitant to participate because I don't know the extent to which I would be expected to, make certain changes. How onerous would that be? How costly would it be? It's interesting to me, but I can also see where some people might shy away from it a little bit if they don't know what to expect in terms of what would be expected of them. So can you fill us in a little bit on those aspects?
Yeah, I can answer both of the questions. In terms of, is there a time limit? The answer to that is no. If you're wanting to develop a team, you need 5 members as a minimum. But team members can join that team at any time. And there's also no kind of like a team has to start on this day. I mean, if, council members thought, they might be interested in this and that their target to start would be April, that's fine. Starting involves going into the Project Neutral website and completing your climate action or your carbon footprint. There are 2 stages to that. One is a 5-minute one, which is just a really cursory look at where you're at. And then the other one is somewhat more in depth. Your personal carbon footprint is kept private. If you're a member of a team, they give you the team average. So it's up to you as to whether you want to share kind of, here's where I'm at. Obviously, the goal is to reduce your carbon footprint, but there isn't an expectation put on you that you have to reduce it by whatever percentage. I mean, you can decide yourself what is doable, so that there isn't, you all have to get electric cars and heat pumps within the first year. You may do something as simple as decide to better seal your external, your outlets on your external walls, which would be the cost of one thing of foam. One of those little cartridges of foam. It may cost you about $12. Or you may decide that you're going to recycle more or whatever. So the whole idea is to look at what is doable for you as a family and as an individual. So does that answer your first question?
Yeah, very much. Okay. Yeah, it answers both actually. Yeah, other questions for Anne. John?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to add a little bit to what Anne said, because I think there's another important dimension to doing this. When Collingwood Cat first launched it, I immediately joined and did it. And then the Owen Sound Group is now doing it. And one of the things that I think that I personally have found, and others that have done it, is that it can be a great learning tool. And so after you do your carbon footprint, and as Anne said, there's a little easy level and a more detailed. The more detailed gives you a more accurate. You can actually go back in and say, well, what if I changed my eating habits? What if I cut my meat consumption in half? Or what if I decided I was going to just limit my driving to 12,000 kilometers a year? You can see the impact of your actions. And so it's a tool that gives you don't actually have to do these things, but you can look at your most effective way for you personally to lower your footprint, and then you can start down that path. So I think the educational aspect of this is huge.
All right, good to know. I have actually gone on and calculated my own personal footprint, and I did find that process to be easy and really, really informative, and it certainly encourages you to think about what you can do as an individual. Member Carlton?
Thank you. I'm just looking at it online now, and you can either join as a team or as an individual. So there is that option just to join as an individual. I'm wondering about forwarding it, though, onto our next council agenda at some point and see if we could get some buy-in from the rest of our council members. I think it's something we could all do together that I think would be valuable.
I agree. I think that's a great idea. And I wonder, you know, we sometimes put these on the agenda as correspondence or under the consent agenda, but I wonder, Brittany, if there might be a way to put it on an agenda where Trevor can speak to it, and give Trevor the opportunity to talk to council, because I don't think he's had much of an opportunity to do that. And perhaps generate some interest and maybe even get some kind of press coverage to encourage the larger community from that. Is that, Trevor, is that something you feel that is doable at this point in time?
I'd have to speak to Brittany a little bit more and Steve, but I mean, it is something that could be brought forward. I think just as long as council understands, for example, I just sit as a member on this committee, and to learn what you guys are doing and to see how we can incorporate that within staff considerations. So as long as council is aware of that should be appropriate.
Yeah, great. And you know, I think it would be kind of interesting if we had the time for you to actually work through a calculation using a fictitious community member, just to sort of ease everyone's minds in terms of it not being difficult or onerous, and that there are different options. Might be a possible strategy. Brittany, did you want to chime in?
Yes, I'm just sitting here and I'm having a lot of thoughts about it, all good thoughts. And I think this presents a very unique opportunity to make the climate action portfolio fun and engaging. So I think we need to place our minds to how to best roll that strategy out and ensure that we're providing incentive enough for people to, you know, come to the table and get really interested in this project. So I haven't fully developed my thought about that yet, but I know I don't want it to be simply just one step at a council meeting. I think we have a lot of opportunity to build off of this and make it exciting. So I thank Member Schneider for bringing this up. Let me think about it, and I would challenge the committee to think about ways that we can make this an exciting opportunity as well, so we can ensure that it's not just a one and done presentation at the council meeting, rather an ongoing method to make the community excited about it.
Excellent. No, that we certainly want to roll it out in the best way possible. Though, you know, I think about the limited number of opportunities we're going to have between now and election time, and we could be looking at a whole different group of faces come the end of November. So while I see the value in rolling it out in a thoughtful kind of a way, I also think it's something that I'd like to see us get started with before it's too late. Over to you, Member Snyder.
Thank you, Chair Coburn. So I really echo what Brittany's saying. I think there's real opportunity here. Now, if I wasn't in a formal municipal council, committee, I would be saying this would warrant a little sub-working group to kind of do a deep think on this and come back to this committee about ideas. And I don't know whether that's allowed within the structure of what we're working. But then the other comment I wanted to make is that if and when we are ready to take this to council, the Collingwood group has actually developed a PowerPoint on it. So that they took to the council in Collingwood, that they have said that we are welcome to use or modify to fit our needs. But I think that Brittany's idea of let's think about this and work it to, you know, so that we can maximize the results of it just make perfect sense to me.
Excellent. Okay, so and you know, again, I'm thinking of incentives, and Brittany alluded to that too. I'm a big one for offering prizes and that kind of thing because you know, sometimes participation precedes interest. So just getting people involved, even if it's because they might win some small token of a prize, the means will justify the ends or vice versa. And I think that's something we can consider as well, some kind of fun activity that incentivizes the participation. So shall we leave that with Trevor and Brittany for now? Is that, Brittany, does that make sense to you?
Thank you. Yes, and I was actually, if the committee is okay with it, I would like to invite Member Schneider into those conversations as well. And then we can kind of form an informal sub-working group, as she alluded to kind of come up with a strategy. And I define those fun ways through an incentive or, you know, a social media platform as well. I'm thinking like a hashtag associated with it. So leave that with us if the committee is so open to that, and we'll come back with some form of a plan to really ensure that we're grasping this opportunity.
Perfect. I see lots of heads nodding and smiling faces, so I think that's a go. Thank you, and thanks, Anne, for bringing that forward. So I will move ahead with the agenda. I don't note any notices of motion unless someone wants to bring one forward at this time. And seeing none, we have no closed session either. And the date of our next regular meeting is February 17th at 10 a.m. So with that, I would just ask for someone to move that we adjourn this meeting. And thank you, Danuta, all in favor. And that carries. Thanks, folks. Productive meeting and good start to the new year. And we'll see you in February.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.